Testing, testing.
Just making sure it's.
Mazda.
Call from Rona Feld.
I think we got a quorum.
Everyone. So at this time, I would like to call to order the Patton Township Planning Commission for July 12th. And first, I'd like a motion for the approval of minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I have a comment first, please.
Go ahead.
Item 7, Contour Farm. Vote should read 5-0 as far as I know, instead of 6-0.
Can you repeat that?
Item 7,
Yep.
Contour Farm replat.
Uh-huh.
There was 5 of us present, so the vote should read 5-0, not 6-0.
Yeah. I agree. Is that the only change to our minutes? Did everybody get that? So Nicole, there were 5 of us present, not 6. Good
Yeah.
call. Any other changes to the minutes? So apart from that one change, we'll implement that suggestion, that correction. Is there any other changes to the minutes? That said, can we have a second to this motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nay. Motion carried. Approval of minutes. Next on our itinerary is public comments. So I'm here, obviously, in the Patton Township building. There is nobody here from the public. I'm not sure if we have anybody on Zoom or not that would like to comment now on anything that's not on the agenda. If there is anything that's on the agenda, then we can table that until the appropriate time in the meeting. So is there anybody in the audience that would like to comment on anything that's not on the agenda? If so, please introduce your name and speak up. Fairly quiet, so assuming that there is no public comments, we'll go on to item number 4, and that is the View Apartments. That was presented to us at our prior meeting. And is there anyone that would like to lead in this discussion?
Yeah, Brian, I will.
Go ahead, Nicole. Thank you.
Sure. So the View Apartments, as most of you probably know, is located on Top Trees Avenue. They are looking to place 2 pre-manufactured sheds to be used by maintenance personnel to take up 12 of the parking spaces that are already constructed. So they're looking for some relief on their parking. They have provided us with some historical parking data to show that they can afford to reduce the amount of parking that they have. Also wanted to make sure that we noted that it came to the township's attention that these sheds were put on the site without receiving the proper permits. So there is a letter included from the senior community manager that gives more detail of the timeline of the sheds and how she would like to work with the township to get those proper inspections and permits in place. And I do believe she is here as well as Mark Hafner if there are additional questions. Oh, and Mr. Burnett, Ken did call me and let me know that you wanted to see where the fire hydrants were, so I can show that as well. And Deb, I'll need to screen share to do that.
Yeah, go
I don't know
ahead.
if we want to do that first, or we want to wait until we hear from the property owner or manager, excuse me.
No preference. We can point out the fire hydrants now.
Okay, I'm going to kick you out.
Let me stop sharing, yeah. Okay.
Thank you. So this first image here is the recorded plan. And if you can see my cursor here, this is, and I'll show the plan that we're looking at tonight, but this is the area where the sheds are. And this little highlighted blip here is the hydrant. And then, let's see, I don't know, I'm just gonna do it the long way because I think it'll mess up if I don't. And then the plan that we're looking at tonight, this is the call out for the sheds, and then this is where that hydrant is.
So Nicole, is that, where are the sheds right now in reference to the hydrant?
This kind of cloud here.
Yeah.
There would be one of them, and then this other one
Oh.
here.
Okay,
So there'd be a fire hydrant right on this corner.
okay, so that's actually pretty close. Was that the concern that someone had, was the proximity of the fire hydrant to the sheds?
Yeah, that was a question raised as to where the nearest hydrant would be for those sheds.
Okay, so to me, common sense applies that it looks like it's relatively close.
Actually, that wasn't exactly why we were asking. The actual asking was for, are the position of the sheds going to interfere with fire access to those hydrants and, standard operations? So, and the reason why I asked is I didn't see a letter from Director Barrett on his opinion.
So Bill, based on your expertise, does that look like that would represent a concern for fire hydrant vehicular traffic?
As long as the shed is not interfering with a hydrant and not interfering with the vehicular access to that hydrant, I don't believe there would be a problem, as long as the sheds are also not interacting with any sort of egress, emergency egress or ingress of emergency fire vehicles.
Okay.
Clear as mud?
Does anyone want to further comment on that? I mean, all I can say is I was there, and based on where the fire hydrant is positioned, to me, not having any qualified expertise, it does seem like it would be out of the way.
I have one comment to remind everyone that the shed on the right-hand side sticks out well past parking spaces. At least 8 foot, if not a little bit more, with the ramp they have built. So that really limits traffic through that in front of the sheds.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Do we have a photo? I haven't actually gone out there and looked at this, so do we have a photo?
I took photos, I don't know if we still have them from last month's meeting, but basically, Bill, what we would be looking at is a shed with probably 8-foot wide doors, and they're probably pulling four-wheelers or just equipment in there and need a ramp to make up for the, 6-inch, 4-inch lip, whatever they have. That's probably the purpose of that ramp, I'm guessing.
If I can interject, that's correct, but it is not a part of the permanent structure. It can be removed.
Will it be removed, or, so what's going in the shed? Right now, do we have equipment in there that are four-wheelers? What can we do about the length of the ramp?
So we can remove the ramp, if that's, what we need to do. We're just trying to, get it compliant. Right now, that's where our maintenance needs to be able to function. That would function as a maintenance shop. So, it would house maintenance materials needed to perform, basic maintenance and care for the communities and, perform hygienic functions throughout the community as well.
Okay.
I have a question. It seems like we go through this every year, and with a multi-million-dollar development there, is there any plan in the future for creating a permanent maintenance building that houses all this stuff?
I'm sorry, that cut out. Would you mind repeating that question?
We go through this every year, it seems like, and I want to know if there's, with a multi-million-dollar investment in this facility, is there any plan to create a permanent maintenance shed that matches the architecture and the things that are going on in that development?
I mean, this is that permanent structure to be able to have maintenance work out of.
This
So
is a permanent,
I can't surmise what my ownership's gonna wanna do in capital projects in the next 5 years. I agree with you. I'd love it to match the other buildings. We certainly do our best. But this is our workaround for now because those funds are not available.
okay.
Any other questions from others on the planning commission?
One other question, I guess. We've got the sheds in place. Absolute minimum is the 12 spaces, but how many parking spaces are going to be taken up by equipment parked there or the maintenance personnel parking there?
Jim, that was,
The maintenance personnel would be factored into that's already accounted for.
well, when I was there, if we count 12 spots, in addition to that, there were about 4 other spots that had equipment in the parking lot. So when you say it's accounted for, is it now in the sheds? Where is that? Where is the gators? I think there might have been 2 gators and some, just some general equipment. So are you coming to us on the planning commission and asking for 12 additional spots and on top of that, parking for equipment, or just 12 total? See the sprayer there? That's a spot. We got some, parking lot bumpers, I guess that's what you call them. So where is this equipment going to be housed?
Right. I mean, the bumpers are clearly movable and those would go inside the shed, as would any utility vehicle. As far as the sprayer that's out there, it's shared between 2 communities. It's shared between the View and the Valley, so it's not permanently parked in that area. Oftentimes it goes down to the Valley when they need it as well.
Where do they park that in the wintertime? Do they put that in the sheds in the wintertime?
No, it's winterized, so it's unnecessary to keep it indoors or in a climate-controlled environment. It can't stay outside. But the purpose of these is that if it did need to come inside, we would have the space to be able to do that.
Okay.
And how about the gators? Where are they parked?
So there's one for the property, and that would go on the interior of the first shed. It's closest to the building, closest to building 4.
Okay. Do we have any other comments, planning commission? Or anyone else?
So my opinion is, I would actually like Director Bear to take a look at this. That's my personal opinion on this.
Can you repeat that, what louder, please?
I would prefer to have Director Bear, the Regional Fire Protection, to take a look at this before we make any movement on this, since this appears to be more than just a temporary, 9x9 shed. This is much more permanent than I realized when I was asking questions earlier today.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is. Go ahead.
Yeah. Did we send this out for review to fire, Ken, Nicole? You got on mute, Ken.
Where is Ken?
No, I don't believe it was sent out
Okay.
to fire review because we were looking at the reduction in the required parking for the facility.
Okay. Well, why don't we do this? I mean, one thing that the planning commission could do is approve this, conditionally approve this, and add the following conditions to the approval is, one, have staff work with the owners on the ramps and make sure that they're either removed or they're not interfering with traffic through there. Two, have Director Bear, Steve Bear, review it, and if changes need to be made, we'll bring it back to the planning commission. And third, in terms of the extra equipment in the parking spaces, just have the ownership agree that if those spaces are needed, they'll find someplace else to park that equipment.
Planning Commission, what are your thoughts?
I'd be happy with that.
I think our general consensus is we want to work with the owners of this development, but I think it's also worthy of saying that we just don't like being in the position where people choose to kind of do what they want with no regard for our codes. And I just do, that's not how we are to do things. And when we're building these multi-million-dollar facilities, to not have the foresight to figure out what to do with the equipment is really inexcusable. But moving forward, so if we do want to move forward, Planning Commission, we need a motion from one of you, please.
I motion that we approve it with that condition, that the fire marshal reviews everything.
And do we have a second?
Yes, I will second that, Chair.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion carried. Next on the item of business is number 5, the Benner Township zoning ordinance update. Nicole, do you want to lead this discussion?
Yes, I do.
Thank
So Benner Township is looking to update their zoning ordinance. And as a neighboring municipality to Benner, we are given the opportunity to review and provide comment. This is actually the third time in recent years that they are looking to do this. The Planning Commission has seen proposed comments in 2019 and again in, I believe, the early summer of last year in 2020. And we were provided a sort of summary of changes from the previous iterations of the draft zoning ordinance as kind of a roadmap to what they're specifically looking to update. So that has been attached, as well as I did draft a comment letter with some suggested comments. If the Planning Commission would like to revise or amend or add to any of those, or take any away if they do not feel that they are necessary. So I'm not sure if you would like to see the letter, if you have had a chance to review the attached documents, if you have any discussion points that you would like to bring up now.
Nicole, can you go over that letter a little bit in a little bit of detail, please?
Sure. Just let me pull it up.
I've got it up on the screen,
So,
I think, yeah. Or,
I see the agenda.
okay. Well, if you've got it, why don't you go ahead and pull it up?
I don't, but I will in a second. Okay, I just got an error message. Let me try that again. Nope. Go another way. Sorry about that. My Adobe has been acting very strange today.
Yeah. You want me to try?
If you have it handier, I'm trying to go into the folder I have it saved in.
Is this the letter from the Beard Law Company? Or is this?
No,
the
this is the letter I have drafted with potential comments.
Oh, okay.
We haven't.
Yeah, we have it.
It would be the second attachment.
While they're looking for that, anyone from the planning commission have any questions on the letter?
Well, I had so the letter that Doug had proposed, the draft that Doug had written.
Yeah.
Or Nicole wrote it, yeah.
Oh, Nicole wrote, so that's the one we're looking at, okay. So, where are the wellheads that were, discussed on page 2, where it said, the State College Borough Water Authority wellheads located in Benner Township? This was having to do with like the, gasoline and fuel tanks, I guess.
So they are located not too far away from the airport. We can't actually show exactly where they are. I believe it's a Homeland Security issue to make that public knowledge where the actual wellheads are.
It makes sense, yeah.
They're in the industrial district that borders our municipality. So that's just kind of water's a shared resource kind of comment.
Good question, Sharon.
I think that was the most poignant point on that for me.
Anyone else on the planning commission have any concerns, comments?
I had another, I agreed too with the other thing that they're tending to let's see, where was that? I had marked it. That everything is becoming like a master use schedule instead of having actual zoning. So that was sort of like what it was leaning towards, right?
Which, are you talking about the municipal uses in buildings? Like this part of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is just sort of calling out that with their municipal uses in buildings, they have far less stringent requirements in most of their zoning districts than they do a lot of their other uses. So it's basically calling out that potentially those uses are a little bit more lax, or could potentially be than some of the other uses they permit.
Anyone
Well,
else? Any other comments?
So it said, as defined, this use discriminates in favor of specific property owners, not specific use of property. So there is that. I mean, I guess that's kind of their problem, but would that have much effect on us in our township?
I mean, it could, because I was looking at the zones that border us specifically, as opposed to looking at their entire township. I was focused on, what actually comes to our border and what might affect some of our other resources. But at the same time, these are just sort of recommendations and advisory comments, so there's not a whole lot of weight that we could put into this, but with municipal uses, it's hard to know exactly what they would do that would end up impacting us.
Well, I just wanted to say I agreed with most of the points in that letter, and I'm just really glad that you brought this up.
Any other comments on the letter or in general? Okay, so let's move, there's no motion to be made there. So maybe Nicole, you can tackle the next item, item 6, and that's the status report on pending items.
Sure thing. So I think the biggest thing, other than the board action items, which as you can see, everything went through the board, and the subdivision and land development ordinance public hearing is coming up in July. But the pending work commission tasks, the solicitor was looking at our sign ordinance and making sure that it was compliant, or maybe marking areas that could be potentially called into question. So she has given that back to staff, and we have been looking at it and looking at the specific sections that we might want to look to update, and kind of took that approach to it, as opposed to trying to overhaul the entire ordinance if that wasn't entirely necessary. So we're still in the process of doing that, and I expect that we'll be ready to bring something back to you probably in August. So probably at our next meeting, we will talk some more about the sign ordinance and some of the recommendations to adjust some of that language that the solicitor pointed out to us.
Very good. Thank you, Nicole. Item 7, reports. So Patton Township Housing Task Force. Who would like to comment on that?
I would like to ask Mr. Payne to speak to that, if you wouldn't mind.
Mr. Payne?
We broke up into our subgroups. Not all I can tell you on the subgroups is on the zoning. We talked about some of the housing issues and reiterated or rehashed duplexes and some of the comments that were made when that was brought forward. Other than that, I don't have too much on it because I've been busy elsewhere.
Very good. Any other business that we need to discuss before we adjourn? Assuming there is none, meeting adjourned. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll motion to adjourn.
Second? Bill? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Motion, meeting adjourned. Thank you. Next, we have our work session. CNET, are you staying for that?
Yeah, they're staying.
Okay. So the first one is exciting, about incentivizing requiring bicycle parking. Nicole, do you want to lead on that?
Just pull this up for you.
While you're pulling that up, it looks like I was pleasantly happy to see that Ferguson has already taken initiative on that. And I guess in terms of our surrounding municipalities seem to be a little bit more progressive. Is that the right way to say that, Ferguson? Or Ferguson is?
I do believe Ferguson has done quite a bit with their requirements. When I was putting this chart together, they do seem to have the most robust requirements.
Yeah.
And they did follow a lot of the change lab solutions and the other documentation that I provided. So, I mean, it just really depends on how you want to look at it. And we did talk at our last meeting about looking at bicycle parking per use instead of by zoning district. And that is kind of what they did as well, is look at it by use instead of specific districts. So it's really kind of up to you guys how much we we're trying to get out of this, or how little. So I did just want to point out that this is all information that I gave to you guys in June, and stuff that I want us to be able to keep referring back to, because I think it's really good stuff. And Trish Meek, who is a planner with the Center Regional Planning Agency, is here with us tonight to help give us kind of more foundational information, and then we can kind of continue to decide how much of it we would like to dig into and potentially write up some regulations for this. So if there's any questions or any thoughts you guys have at this point, we can discuss it, or we can turn it over to Trish and she can kind of walk us through some things, and then we can have kind of a discussion with her as well. It's kind
Let's
of
do-
up to you guys how you want to proceed.
Yeah, let's do that. Trish, so the floor is yours. Take it away.
Right, well, I think Nicole's gonna, I put together a quick PowerPoint presentation. Nicole's gonna share that on my behalf. And just a little bit of background about Ferguson. When they went forward with a major rewrite to their zoning and subdivision and land development ordinance, Nicole is correct. We provided them the change lab information that she has provided you, and their consultant did incorporate it into the regulations. So we haven't seen a lot of activity since that point, but they're definitely the most robust in the form of an ordinance to require bike parking. So with that, if you want to go to the next slide, Nicole. I just wanted to come here tonight to just provide you a little bit more basic information. We as staff, of course, can put together a model ordinance or a draft model ordinance for you to review and act upon or discuss. But I just wanted to let you know a little bit more about racks in general. So if you're not out there riding and using racks, there's some things that are really important to cyclists that make a difference when they're parking their bike. So just from an overall perspective, why do we need park biking, and why do we need to require or incentivize it so that we see more of it? I think we all know there's been a real explosion in biking over the last year. If you've read any articles, you know at one point it was extremely difficult to even buy a bike. So even if you had the resources, you couldn't get your hands on one. And people are actually starting to do more biking as a form of transportation as well. So we want people to bike. Bike parking takes up a lot less space than car parking. From the benefit of roadway capacity, our trail system and network regionally continues to grow. And Patton Township is actually out there building per year the most number of miles of paths. So we've seen a lot of activity in Patton, which is extremely encouraging. And they're the types of trails that do form part of our transportation network. So bike parking is part of those amenities that cyclists need. It's really important when someone is making a trip by bike that they know that there's a place for them to safely park it when they get there. So I think there's some anxiety by individuals. Will I have a place that's secured with that bike when I get there, so that I can perform the tasks that I want to perform at that end of trip? And we even know some people, particularly someone in our office, that actually bought a bike so they could do their daily commuting that would replace the need to buy a new car. So there are people in our community with this growing network that are using bikes more from a transportation perspective than just a recreation perspective. And the bottom line is, if we're going to require developers to install bike racks, we definitely want them to be usable. So they're protecting the bike and keeping it secure, and then people are more confident riding.
Makes sense.
So there's two types of basic bike parking. So there's short-term and long-term. And if you had an opportunity to look at any of the information that the links were provided in the agenda, you'll see, and even with the Ferguson ordinance, that, we think about these two types, and when we're requiring them as part of an ordinance, it's important that we look at specifications for both of them. And that's really important when it comes to multifamily residential, which we know, based on your first conversation tonight, one of the agenda items, that, multifamily is something that we see in the region and we will continue to see. So first I want to talk a little bit about short-term. So with short-term parking, we think of these parkers as someone that's going to be there for less than 2 hours. And I'll just say that this picture here is a picture of one of the 2 fleet bikes at COG. So we went forward and purchased a couple bikes, and we're going to be launching a program now that if you want to ride instead of driving to a meeting, we have bikes available. Or if you want to go out for a spin or a recreational ride over lunch, you can also use the bikes for that as well. Just another way to encourage employees to be active. But this is actually a Darrow post and ring rack. I'll talk a little bit more about the types of racks. They're really great. because they can support those bikes in two places. We don't have problems. Some of the racks we actually call informally wheel benders. When you park at them, you can actually damage your bike. But think of people that are there for up to 2 hours or under 2 hours as short term. And it's really important that those racks be visible from and close to an entrance, so less than 50 feet. So you want to give the edge to the cyclist, right? You want to make it attractive to ride your bike, so you need to make it easy to park your bike, get in the store, get out of the store, and find your way. There are some parameters in some of the model information that was provided that if it's not close enough to be seen, you should have a sign that says bike parking with a directional arrow to make it clear where it's at. The other thing that a lot of cyclists like, and when we've done surveys repeatedly, not only do people want bike parking, but they want covered bike parking. So you don't want your bike to be exposed to the elements. You don't want your seat to be wet when you go outside. So this particular rack, if you've been to the COG building, is to the left of the main building entrance, and it's actually a covered walkway there. We were able to put these bikes in without, these racks in without any problem to obstruct that walkway. And it really, they're visible, it's a lighted area, it's extremely close to the entrance, and it's covered as well. So we're getting all of those points. The other thing is you want them to be secure and sturdy and well anchored. So if you look at this picture quickly or closely, we have pavers out there, but fortunately we have these concrete ribbons that are there that gave us the ability to anchor into the existing concrete. But it's one of those things when we're looking at where we want developers to place bike parking, concrete pads are the way to go. This is a surface mount. You can also embed them in the materials as well. Those are two of the top ways to do it. The bottom line is you don't want someone walking away with the rack with the bike attached to it. So, you know, we do live in State College. It's an extremely safe place to be, but bike theft does occur here. And locking your bike is extremely important, especially if any of you have gone bike shopping lately, you know that they can be quite expensive. So with long-term bike parking, we are also thinking about security and weather protection. These are people that are parking them there longer than 2 hours. And if you've parked in some of the garages on campus, you've probably seen some of the high-density racks that they've installed. So anybody that's been to the Creamery, if you've driven there, there are long-term racks right inside that garage as well. They're very innovative. Sometimes they're two-level racks. They give you options to park a lot of bikes in a small space, and it makes them very secure. So these would be those cases where you don't want people bringing the bikes onto elevators into high-density residential settings, for example, that you could have a secure storage area that's right there off the entrance. You're also not bringing bikes through corridors that can create mess or bring dirt into the area. You know we have a lot of off-road or mountain bikers in our area because we have such exceptional facilities. I would say when we talk to many cyclists, they'll say that some of the trails in Rock and State Game Land, some of these other areas, for some of the tops in the country, they're easy to access. You could actually ride to them in some cases. You don't have to pay to use them. So we know that we have a lot of that activity in our area. It also, we would be accommodating that space for people to park them. They wouldn't have to worry about them. It could be long-term storage. And again, sometimes they're situated in parking garages. We used to see more bike lockers, and years ago I can remember being on campus near some of the dorms when bikes weren't as prevalent that there would be lockers there. We don't see them as much here in our area, but in areas that have a higher crime rate, they are more likely to have them there if you can't bring them into your residential area. So think about short and long term are both very important. I'll just point out that one of the things that we see with some of these newer types of multifamily residential is if we don't put the bike parking in the correct location, they'll just lock them to the poles on their front porch, which of course is not illegal. You're not obstructing an ADA accessible area, but it's not very attractive, could do damage to the structure. So really, when an ordinance is put in place, it's really important to think about what really makes sense. We don't want it too far away. We want it to be convenient. We want it to be covered. If it can be indoors for long-term, that's better. And every apartment complex or multifamily residential area has different policies about bringing bikes into their actual structures. Now, as far as bike rack installation, just a little bit about just overall, I keep using this particular rack because this is one of my favorite types. It just provides so much support to the bikes. It's very easy to understand how to park your bike correctly next to them. All locks, UN cable work with these types of racks, so they're just great. There's a number of manufacturers out there. You know, going into a concrete pad is ideal, very difficult to remove that rack once it's in there. This is a surface mount standard, so you can see where you actually bolt it into the concrete itself. You can also do embedded. So that, I just wanted to give you just a snapshot of that simple rack. Because anytime, if you ever ask me to review a plan, I'm always going to say, this particular type or the inverted U are the one from a staff perspective that we would recommend. Now, as far as bike rack selection, this is all in that material in the Association of Bicycle and Pedestrian Professionals. You will find this information in there. And it's just really important to think of it this way. It needs to support the bike in an upright position without putting stress on the wheels. You need to think about different types of bikes. So, you know, we are now seeing more cargo bikes in the area. They're longer than traditional bikes. So when we're thinking about how we're spacing them or how close they are to a building or structure or the street, it's really important that we think about, you know, how big is the bike itself? Some bikes are equipped with an attachment to actually have children ride behind you as well. And we want to make it easy for people to ride if they choose to ride, to lock their bikes when they get there. And, you know, this whole locking of the frame in at least one wheel, I didn't put the photo in here, but as part of our Biking 101 class, we talk a lot about it's really important that you don't just lock to that front wheel, because with quick release levers that are on most bikes these days, it's as simple as popping that lever and they can walk away with your frame and your componentry, which are the most expensive parts of your bike. Very easy to do, and it has happened many times. So you need to secure as much of the bike as possible. And, you know, it needs to be secure. And it would be great if we could put it in places where people, so if you're at a restaurant, and, you know, it should be visible by people that are in the restaurant if possible. Just put it in places that are well lit or seen by people. You know, it needs to be tamper resistant mounting hardware in vulnerable locations. Just really simple things that we can handle by putting some specific language in the ordinance and then just implementing it in a prudent way. And it has to be intuitive. So we don't want people standing there thinking, how do I lock my bike to this rack? And when, on a couple more slides, I'm going to show you some of the least attractive racks, and I'm going to tell you the one that I dislike the most in the region, and every time I see it, I kind of cringe a little bit. But you really need to be able to look at that rack and know exactly where to position your bike to lock it. So again, inverted U's and post and ring. They're our favorites. If you ask many experienced cyclists, they will tell you that they never have an issue using these types of racks. They love them. Actually, those inverted U's can be put on rails, and you can see a number of them consistently. And sometimes they'll do something called a bike corral within the roadway itself in dense urban areas. They actually put a bike corral outside of the Allen Street Grill during nicer weather to maximize the amount of parking that can be there. We're seeing that more and more in dense urban areas. And in the downtown area, State College, there are requests for more bike racks all the time. You know, we want to make sure people are parking them in the appropriate locations and not putting them on trees or handrails that would obstruct access. So as far as the rack that I hate the most, the Wave is the one. I don't know why, but architects, I think, just love the look of this rack. And actually, our building, the Cog building, has an old Wave rack out front. And so we were happy to get those post and ring racks undercover near the door. But what happens is, if you try to lock your bike to this, actually this rack should accommodate, I'm counting, six bikes. And what happens is sometimes people come and instead of pulling their wheel in adjacent to a horizontal or a vertical post, they'll park it parallel to the rack. So 2 bikes could park next to it. And it makes sense. It's because it really can't support that bike. Now, kickstands are more popular or coming back. There was a time when there weren't always kickstands, as many kickstands on bikes. But the problem is if someone parks next to you, your bike can be knocked over, it can damage the wheel. And that schoolyard rack, these are really old style racks, and we actually call them wheel benders because bad things can happen. I'm not saying that it will, but when you get a lot of racks, a lot of bikes parked in those, you can have problems. Ones like the coat hanger, part of the problem is that it doesn't accommodate all types of bikes. The wheel well doesn't support that bike the way it should be supported. The spiral is very, very difficult to park because you have to lift the bike in order to put it, that front wheel to park it. And the swing arm has some movement to it, it just complicates everything. Now, sometimes you can have very decorative racks, and there's certain specifications that you can use just to ensure that they meet those minimum standards. So they don't have to look like the inverted U or the post and ring all the time, but they need to meet certain specifications, and we can write that into the ordinance. Now, that model ordinance gives us a lot of really great stuff. And Nicole did some work, and she showed me all the different potential uses in Patton Township when you look at the ordinance. And it's mind-boggling. The chart it's very large. But we can boil it down to some of those simple categories that are shown in the model ordinance, and Ferguson used it. They took that ordinance and then they implemented it with a few little clarifications. One of the things in there that's really interesting is if it's not exact, a determination can be made to determine what's the closest use, and we can apply those standards there. So it basically looks at the use category, so that land use type, and it provides guidelines for here's how much short-term parking you need, here's how much long-term parking you need, here's the number of spaces that you need. And it can be dependent upon the number of bedrooms or units and the number of square feet based on the use itself. So it makes a lot of sense. You know, it's nationally recognized. I mean, we can tweak those numbers if you want to, but it does provide the basis for us to put in place a really strong and solid ordinance to require bike parking. And then the other thing that I just wanted to point out, I'm not sure how many of you are bike enthusiasts or looking at mapping for the area, but we do have a tool. So on the COG website, there's a bike tab. And if you go there, we have an interactive GIS map for our bike facilities. And I just did a quick screenshot because we've started collecting data for Downtown State College to map where the routes are. So it would give cyclists that are looking for a route to ride actually an idea where they could park their bike. And not only will it give you, if you click on the little green dots, a location, but it'll tell you what kind of rack is there and how many potential bikes can be parked there. So what would be great about this is when plans come in, we have the ability to capture data in a database. We could then take that information, and when racks are installed in Patton Township or any of the municipalities, we can start adding them to the mapping as well. And it just provides a little bit more information to just make it more solid about the types of facilities that are out there. And I believe that's the last slide. Correct, Nicole? Do I have a wrap up? I can't remember. Yeah. So with that, we just wanted to help you understand what's important to cyclists related to racks. So if we're writing an ordinance, we want to make sure that it addresses what cyclists need at that end of trip destination. So I can answer any questions, and Nicole said that we're just trying to provide you basic information to make decisions. And Nicole and I can work together to prepare draft ordinance language. We can work with Ken or any other staff that's necessary to do that as well. So I'll answer any questions if you have any.
Trish, I guess I'll go first. Really, I'm appreciative of the efforts that you and Nicole have put forth on this, and certainly very knowledgeable. So I think it would be very helpful if you could, you and Nicole, put a rough draft ordinance together just to lead us in the right direction. Clearly, you're by far the most knowledgeable. Planning Commission members, are you in agreement that we'd like to get something in an ordinance, a rough draft of an ordinance?
I like that idea.
Yeah, so,
I have a couple of questions about that, though.
go ahead.
So if we're writing an ordinance for something like this, does that just apply to like new developments, or when somebody is proposing like to, like redo a parking lot or a building or something like that, or is it, retroactive for existing?
I'm going to
It's a
answer
great-
that. I'm going to let Doug confirm. So the question is, what would be applicable? And I believe, Sharon, the answer to that is just new plans moving forward, not anything that's existing. For example, Patton Crossing. So that's, that's now being built, but that plan's already been approved. So there's nothing more that we could do with the current phase, but let's say that Patton Crossing has multiple phases, maybe we could get our teeth on the latter phases. Is that correct, Doug?
Correct.
That's about it. So whatever's approved stays that way and is grandfathered. It's just everything moving forward.
And then what do you do about like, so, because I love the idea of this, I really do. But I just wondered, like, in areas where, like in the downtown areas she was showing, or like areas where like parking has already been specifically allocated, how do you make sure that if somebody wanted to do something like this voluntarily, that they wouldn't be taking up the required square footage or width for pedestrian traffic that's already been approved, or the required spaces for parking? I mean, is there specific language that can be done? So for like apartment complexes and things should embrace this, you would think, but they also have all these other specific requirements that we've already demanded of them.
Yeah, so I guess my understanding on that is every municipality, every developer, every landowner is going to go to the respective municipalities and make a pitch that we would like to change our parking ratio and add, this in lieu for bicycle parking. Are you in agreement? So that's probably going to be about it.
Oh, okay.
Trish, one of the things I think, a couple things that I appreciated you commenting on. One is the ability to, when a plan is submitted, that you can keep track of where all these new parking racks are going to be. So that leads me to my next question, and that is, Doug, when we submit these plans, are they still paper or are they electronic, or does that not even factor into this?
We get them submitted in both formats. So you'd have to ask Trish how they're really developing their map.
So I guess at the end of the day, I'm just trying to think of something that has to be workable. So, we have to get information that we can easily, somehow put it on a map so people can see where future parking spots will be. Think about that as you draft the ordinance.
Yeah, one of the things that we generally do is we only add facilities once they're completed and open to the public. So we don't want to mislead someone, but as part of the way that we record plans as they come in, we're collecting data in our database. So that plan could be flagged as potentially having 3 racks. And then we would then go back at a later time and we'll collect those we'll GPS those points. We'll add them to our base data layer in our ARC system, and then they'll be available there. And what's really interesting about it is that we do have some volunteers that are willing to go out and start collecting data on existing racks in Patton Township. So we're hopeful that over the next year, that interactive map will explode into the adjacent municipalities. So it won't just be downtown. But once that happens, that's where tracking what's coming is really important, so we can keep an eye on it and know when we need to add it.
Perfect.
And that'll be an internal process within CRPA.
Perfect.
But people have told us that they're interested in it, and that's why we want to make sure that we're doing
Trish, with Ferguson Township, did they do anything in reference to covered parking, in reference to lighting in parking, parking?
I think I need to go back and look at it for sure, but the model ordinance makes suggestions about those things. Requiring covered parking as an overall requirement for covered parking might be difficult to do, but sometimes when you look at how these buildings are, the way they're planned, you might be able to just find that place where it works in there, to put
Right.
it in there.
Right.
And that would be part of the plan review process. So we can make recommendations about that, and then we can go back to the developer once we see that draft plan and say, are you able to make some changes and make this work? But of course, like that visibility from the front door for short-term parking is the most important thing.
Yeah,
If you
one of
can't
the things
find-
that's probably accurate is if there is suggestive language to have covered parking, it's probably going to lend itself closer to the structure itself, and probably closer to the front of the front door. In Ferguson, did you guys make any suggestions then as to the type of parking? Like to stay away from the curve, the S curves, or how is that addressed, or has that not been addressed?
The way that it's handled is we can put information in there, in that model ordinance. It talks about the rack must support the bike in 2 places. That type of language gives us the ability, when they submit the plan and they put the detail sheet in there, we can say that rack does not meet the standard. So we're not necessarily saying you must use an inverted U or a post and ring, but based on what they submit, we can tell them if it does or does not meet the ordinance itself.
And
You
then-
don't want to take away all that ability to be somewhat creative, but
Sure.
we can evaluate. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Then Trish, the lockers, to me, that seemed like a nice thing, just to have the ability to, maybe you're going to take a coat, you get outside, you get where you want to be, you realize you don't need your coat, but you don't want to really have it hanging around. So are communities of our size in other areas, do they tend to have lockers, or what's going on with that? Is that trending, or is that something that's not such a big deal?
I think it's less likely now. One of the reasons is lockers are expensive and they take up a large footprint. So
Yeah.
when you think about what a consecutive string of inverted U racks take up versus the ability to actually store your bike in a locker, it's a big space constraint, and they're not cheap. So it's going to cost more to put lockers in.
Got it. Any other questions from the Planning Commission? If not, we certainly appreciate your input, and I think we can all say we look forward to seeing something with a little more teeth in it that we can move forward.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Trish.
Thank you.
Sounds like we're done, gang, so see everybody next month. Any other comments before we wrap it up? Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Went a little longer than I thought. So that's good, Doug. We can get something with some teeth in it, get that thing passed, moved on.
I can get working on that.
I am